We live in noisy times, and I'm not just referring to the literal noise of cities, traffic, buildings. I'm talking about a deeper, more penetrating noise, a constant cacophony that reverberates not only in our ears, but in our minds and hearts. It's the incessant buzz of notifications in our pockets, the avalanche of information, often contradictory, alarming, that overwhelms us with every click, every swipe of the screen. It is the silent but overwhelming pressure of social media that compels us to compare our lives, our bodies, our achievements with edited and idealized versions of other people's reality. It is the latent anxiety generated by a world in constant flux, by an uncertain future, by professional and personal demands that seem to multiply exponentially. This noise takes many forms. It's the unsolicited opinion, the veiled judgment, the advertising that tells us what we want, the news that causes us indignation or fear, the pending task that steals our sleep. It is the inner voice of self-criticism, amplified by the external echo of comparison. It's the feeling of always running, always late, always trying to catch up with something that seems to be constantly slipping away, like an unattainable horizon. Let me know which noise bothers you most today. Write in the comments. How many times do we feel fragmented, with our attention divided between 1,000 stimuli, unable to concentrate on a single task, a single conversation, a single thought? How often do we feel that our inner peace is a fortress constantly under siege by this invasion of external and internal stimuli? And herein lies a disconcerting paradox of our age. We have never been so connected, technologically speaking. We have the world in the palm of our hands, access to a volume of information that past generations could not even dream of. We can instantly communicate with people on the other side of the planet, and yet, many of us have never felt so alone, so isolated in the digital crowd. We have never had so many tools to optimize our lives, to be productive, to show our best. And paradoxically, the feeling of emptiness, anxiety, and exhaustion seems to be a silent epidemic. The more we look for external validation, likes, comments, approval, the more fragile our internal self-esteem seems to become. The more information we consume, the less wise we feel, lost in a sea of data without the compass of clarity. This is the great paradox of noise. In our incessant search for more connection, more information, more stimulation, more recognition, we run the risk of losing what is essential: ourselves, our tranquility, our capacity for discernment. It is in this scenario, in this whirlwind of deafening noise, that an ancient philosophy born more than 2 millennia ago in the busy streets of Athens and Rome resurfaces with surprising relevance. I'm talking about Stoicism. Perhaps the name sounds austere, distant, academic, but its essence is deeply practical, human, and above all silent. Not a silence of emptiness or apathy, but a powerful silence. A silence that is a source of strength, clarity, and resilience, precisely where we need it most, within us. Stoicism offers us a way not to eliminate external noise. That would be largely impossible and even undesirable, but to cultivate a space of calm and order within us, an inner citadel immune to external storms. He teaches us the art of distinguishing between what we can control, our thoughts, our judgments, our actions, and what is beyond our control, the actions of others, external events, the past, the future. And it is in this fundamental distinction that immense freedom lies. By focusing our energy, our attention on what depends on us, we stop being hostages to circumstances, other people's opinions, and the chaos of the world. This is the silent power of Stoicism. It is not a power that shouts, that imposes itself, that seeks the spotlight. It is a power that manifests itself in serenity, in the face of adversity, in clarity of thought in the midst of confusion, in the ability to act with virtue and purpose even when everything around seems to fall apart. It is the power to choose our response, even when we cannot choose the situation. It is the power to find contentment not in the accumulation of external goods or social approval, but in the integrity of our character and the quality of our intentions. It is silent because it operates in the intimate sphere of our consciousness, in the choices we make at each moment, in the way we interpret the world and our place in it. It is the quiet strength of reason, of lucid acceptance of what we cannot change, and of determined courage to change what we can and should. Think of the greats of Stoicism: Seneca, an imperial advisor and playwright; Epictetus, a slave who became an influential philosopher; Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who wrote his meditations during military campaigns. Men who lived lives full of challenges, of power, of danger, of noise. And yet, in this philosophy, they found the tools to navigate these turbulent waters with admirable dignity and lucidity. They did not isolate themselves from the world. They immersed themselves in it, but equipped with an inner armor forged in reason, self-discipline, and an understanding of human nature and the cosmos. What Stoicism proposes to us, then, is not an escape from the noisy world, but a way of inhabiting it with more wisdom and less suffering. It is an invitation to turn off the autopilot of impulsive reactions, constant anxiety, the incessant search for external validation. It is a call to cultivate our inner garden, to strengthen our mind, to align our actions with our deepest values. Faced with the avalanche of information, Stoicism teaches us to filter, to question, to focus on what is truly useful and relevant for a good life. In the face of social pressure, it teaches us to anchor our self-esteem in our own virtue, not in the fluctuating opinions of others. In the face of uncertainty and adversity, it offers us the resilience of acceptance and the strength to act correctly, regardless of the outcome. This silent power is not passivity. Rather, it is a deeply engaged form of action, but directed by reason and purpose, not fear or reactive desire. It is the ability to hear beyond the noise, to find the signal amidst the static, to listen to the calm voice of our own conscience. It is the discovery that the greatest source of peace and strength is not found outside, in the midst of the cacophony, but here inside, in the cultivated silence of our mind and spirit. It's learning to be the calm in the eye of the hurricane. Along this journey that we are now beginning, we will explore in depth how we can, in practice, apply these ancient principles to the very real and noisy challenges of the 21st century. Let's uncover the tools that Stoicism offers us to transform noise into music, anxiety into considered action, and the feeling of fragmentation into rediscovered integrity. Prepare to discover the transformative force that resides in inner silence. So how do we begin to cultivate this transformative force that resides in the inner silence mentioned earlier? How do we access this internal citadel that Stoicism proposes us to build? The first step, paradoxically simple and deeply challenging in our noisy culture, is the inner dive. We need to have the courage to turn off, even if only for a moment, the incessant flow of external stimuli and turn our attention inward, to the vast and often neglected territory of our own mind, our own heart. This is not an act of escapism, but rather an act of profound realism and essential recovery. It is recognizing that to navigate the outer world with clarity and purpose, we must first understand and order our inner world. We live in a time that glorifies extroversion, constant action, visibility. We are encouraged to share everything, to always be connected, to project a carefully curated image to the outside. But in this process, how many times do we stop to really listen to what is happening inside us? How often do we allow ourselves to be alone with our thoughts, without the immediate need to drown them out with music, podcasts, social media, or simply more work? This inner dive requires precisely this, creating spaces of stillness, moments in which the noise of the world attenuates enough for us to hear our own inner voice, often drowned out by the general cacophony. And what do we find when we dare to dive into this silence? Initially, it may be uncomfortable. We may encounter restlessness, anxious thoughts that we normally ignore, repressed emotions that bubble to the surface. Silence has this remarkable ability to function like a mirror without filters. It reflects not only our hopes and dreams, but also our fears, our insecurities, our contradictions. It is precisely in this honest confrontation that the potential for genuine self-knowledge lies. Far from the masks we wear socially, far from the narratives we build about ourselves, silence allows us to see who we really are, with our lights and our shadows. It allows us to observe the automatic patterns of our mind, how we react to certain stimuli, what stories we tell ourselves, what triggers make us nervous. The Stoics would call this examining our impressions, not blindly accepting our initial thoughts and feelings, but questioning them, understanding them at their source. This self-knowledge facilitated by silence is the master key to healing. How many emotional wounds do we carry with us, often without even being aware of them? Past traumas, unresolved resentments, limiting beliefs that sabotage our potential. The constant noise of modern life often serves as anesthesia, a way of avoiding contact with this pain. We distract ourselves so as not to feel. But healing rarely happens on the run. It happens in acceptance, in understanding. Silence offers the safe space for these wounds to surface, not to submerge us, but to be seen, recognized, and, little by little, integrated. It's like allowing a physical wound to breathe to heal. In silence, we can revisit difficult memories not with the intention of ruminating, but with the intention of understanding the lesson, of releasing the associated emotional charge, of forgiving ourselves or others. It is a process that requires compassion and patience, qualities that flourish more easily in stillness than in turmoil. Stoic acceptance here does not mean passive resignation, but rather the lucid recognition of the reality of the past and our present emotions, as a starting point for a conscious transformation. And beyond self-knowledge and healing, the inner dive into silence leads us to an encounter with our deepest truth. In a society saturated with opinions, biases, and pressures to conform, it is incredibly easy to lose touch with our own internal compass, with our core values. What really matters to me? What kind of life do I want to live? What principles do I want to guide my actions? Silence, by reducing the interference of external voices, allows these questions to resonate and the answers to begin to emerge from our core. These are not answers that come from a book or a guru, but from an authentic place within us. It is in this space of stillness that we can discern between the genuine desires of our soul and the desires imposed by consumer culture or the search for social approval. We find clarity about our priorities, about what really nourishes us and what drains us. This inner truth becomes our anchor, our source of integrity, allowing us to navigate life's complexities with greater conviction and less hesitation. It is aligning ourselves with what the Stoics would call living in accordance with our own rational and virtuous nature. However, let's be realistic. This dive is not always easy or pleasant. Facing our own mind without distractions can be intimidating. Silence can feel empty or even threatening at first. We may feel bored, impatience, or the urgency to return to the familiar noise. This is where discipline and intention become crucial. It is not about reaching a state of absolute mental emptiness, an almost impossible task, but about cultivating the ability to observe our thoughts and feelings without identifying excessively with them, without being dragged along by their current. It's about deliberately creating moments of pause in our routine, perhaps starting with a few minutes a day of simple stillness, of paying attention to our breathing, of contemplation without a specific goal, or perhaps through reflective writing in a journal. It is training like any other that strengthens the muscle of mindfulness and introspection. The fruits of this inner dive, however, far outweigh the initial discomfort. The mental clarity that emerges allows us to make more considered decisions. The emotional healing that begins frees us from old burdens, making room for more joy and lightness. Getting in touch with our inner truth gives us a sense of purpose and authenticity that no external validation can match. By understanding ourselves better, we also become more understanding and empathetic towards others. We learn to distinguish the essential from the trivial, to focus our energy on what truly makes for a meaningful life, what the Stoics would call a flourishing life, or eudaimonia. This process of turning inward, of seeking silence to find self-knowledge, healing, and truth is not an end in itself, but the essential foundation upon which we can build a life that is more resilient, more serene, and more aligned with our deepest values, even amid the inevitable noise of the world. It is the crucial first step to accessing that silent power that resides within each of us. Having established this foundation, the inner dive is a path to self-knowledge, healing, and truth. How does this silent power, newly discovered or rediscovered, manifest on the everyday battlefield of our emotions? How does this inner stillness translate into palpable strength in the face of life's challenges, provocations, and inevitable turbulence? The answer lies in building what we can call an emotional fortitude, an ability to navigate the often choppy sea of our feelings without sinking, controlling our impulses and reactions through the conscious and strategic use of silence. This is not a silence of emptiness or passivity, but an active silence, a powerful tool of self-control and practical wisdom. Let's think about the countless daily situations that test our patience, poke at our insecurities, or fill us with frustration. An unexpected criticism at work, a passive-aggressive comment from a family member, a reckless driver in traffic, disturbing news, or even the simple setback of a plan that goes wrong. What is our most common, almost instinctive reaction? Often, it is an immediate response, driven by the emotion of the moment, a harsh word, an exalted defense, a gesture of irritation, a hasty decision made in the heat of the moment. We act almost like automatons, caught in a reactive stimulus-response chain where initial emotion directly dictates our subsequent action, often with consequences we later regret. We feel the anger and explode. We feel the hurt and lash out or withdraw. We feel fear and freeze or run away. This is where strategic silence comes into play, acting as a circuit breaker in this reactive circuit. The practice of cultivating inner stillness, as we explored earlier, trains our mind to recognize the space, sometimes tiny, almost imperceptible, that exists between the stimulus, the external event or the internal thought, and our response. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, observed that between the stimulus and the response there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose the response. In our response lies our growth, and our happiness. Strategic silence is the tool that allows us to inhabit and expand this precious space. It is the conscious pause we introduce before speaking, before acting, before we even solidify an internal judgment. This silence can manifest itself externally and internally. Externally, it is the deliberate decision not to respond immediately. When faced with provocation, instead of responding instantly, we can choose to take a deep breath and remain silent for a few moments. This is not a sign of weakness or submission. Rather, it is an act of immense power and self-control. How many arguments could be avoided, or at least conducted more constructively, if we simply paused before speaking? This brief interlude allows the initial intensity of the emotion to decrease slightly, for the adrenaline to begin to subside. It gives us time to process what was said or what happened, rather than just reacting to our initial interpretation, which is often distorted by emotion. It allows us to ask, what is the most helpful, wisest, most values-aligned response in this situation, rather than, how can I win this argument or vent this anger? This is what Seneca suggested when he advised that, in the face of anger, the best medicine is postponement. But perhaps even more crucial is internal strategic silence. Even if we don't say anything outwardly, our mind can be buzzing in a storm of reactive thoughts, judgments, and rehearsals of future responses. Strategic internal silence involves applying the same pause to our mental activity. It is the ability, cultivated through the introspection and mindfulness that silence facilitates, to observe the emergence of a strong emotion, anger, fear, envy, resentment, without being immediately swept away by it. It's acknowledging the thought, this is an outrage, or I'm not good enough, as just that. A thought, an impression, as the Stoics would say, and not an absolute truth or a command to act. This inner silence allows us to examine this impression. Where does this emotion come from? Is it a proportionate reaction to the actual situation, or is it being amplified by past wounds or insecurities? The self-knowledge and healing we covered earlier. What is really in my control here? My response, my judgment, my next action. By practicing this internal silence, we are not suppressing or denying our emotions. Emotions are signals, valuable information. The goal is not to become robots without feelings. The goal is to become masters of our response to emotions rather than being their slaves. It's like an experienced musician who hears a dissonant note. He doesn't break the instrument in frustration. He recognizes dissonance, understands its cause, and adjusts his technique to create harmony. In the same way, strategic silence allows us to hear the emotional dissonance within us, understand its origin, thanks to prior self-knowledge, and choose a response that restores our inner balance and contributes to a more constructive outcome externally. We are moving from the limbic system, the most reactive part of our brain, to the prefrontal cortex, the center of reasoning, judgment, and long-term planning. Developing this emotional fortitude through strategic silence is an ongoing process, a skill that improves with intentional practice. It starts with small things, taking a break before responding to an email that irritates us. Take 3 deep breaths before entering into a difficult conversation. Simply notice the urge to react impulsively and choose to observe that urge for a moment before acting. Every time we introduce this deliberate pause, we are strengthening the muscle of self-control and conscious response. We are training our mind not to be hijacked by immediate emotion. We are building brick by brick what the Stoics called an inner citadel, a haven of calm and mental clarity that remains stable even when storms rage outside. The benefits of this practice extend far beyond simply managing anger or frustration. Greater emotional strength, built on the foundation of strategic silence, drastically improves the quality of our relationships. We become better listeners, more effective communicators, and less prone to unnecessary conflict. We make more considered and rational decisions, especially under pressure, as we are not clouded by the fog of emotional reactivity. Our resilience in the face of adversity increases. We are able to face setbacks with more equanimity, learning from them instead of being defined by them. We feel greater respect for ourselves, knowing that we are capable of acting in accordance with our values even when it's difficult. And perhaps surprisingly, by mastering our own reactions, we often become a source of calm and stability for others. This ability to dominate impulses and reactions is therefore not a form of cold repression, but rather the maximum expression of inner freedom. It is the freedom to choose who we want to be in each moment, regardless of external circumstances or internal turmoil. It is the practical application of self-knowledge and healing achieved in silence. It's reclaiming our power as architects of our response, rather than being mere victims of our fleeting emotions. Strategic silence thus becomes the invisible shield that protects us from impulsive reactivity and the precise tool with which we carve out a life of greater serenity, purpose, and integrity, a truly flourishing life, a eudaimonia lived in practice. It is the transformation of the silent power within into an active, stabilizing force in the world. This inner fortress, built with strategic silence, is not just a passive shelter against emotional storms. It is also the watchtower from where we can get a clear view of the land around us. Once we learn to use silence to master our impulsive reactivity and build a foundation of emotional stability, we discover another of its profound gifts, the ability to dispel the mental fog that so often clouds our judgment, blurs our attention, and prevents us from discerning what is truly essential. We live in an era of unprecedented cacophony, a constant avalanche of information, notifications, requests, and stimuli competing for our limited attention. This sensory and cognitive overload creates a kind of persistent brain fog, a condition of chronic distraction and shallow thinking that leaves us feeling scattered, anxious, and often unable to think deeply or clearly. Think about your typical day. How many times is your flow of thought interrupted by an alert on your cell phone, a new email appearing in your inbox, the buzz of social media, or simply the internal pressure to check something quickly? This constant fragmentation of attention has a real neurological cost. It prevents us from entering states of flow and deep concentration, essential for creative work, complex problem solving, and meaningful learning. It conditions us to jump from one superficial task to another, rarely diving deep into any of them. The result is often a feeling of being busy, even exhausted, but without the satisfaction of having accomplished something truly important. It's like trying to navigate in a thick fog. We may be moving a lot, but without a clear sense of direction or progress. Our mental landscape becomes saturated with noise, making it difficult to distinguish between the important signal and the irrelevant static. It is here that silence, once again, reveals itself not as an absence, but as a powerful presence, the presence of clarity. By intentionally cultivating moments of external and internal silence, we are essentially creating clearings in this cognitive fog. External silence, by reducing the bombardment of sensory stimuli, allows our nervous system to calm down and our attention span to recover. It's like turning off the noisy radio that was constantly playing in the background, allowing us to finally hear our own thoughts more clearly. But it is inner silence, the practice of quieting the mind's incessant chatter, that truly unlocks clarity. When we stop jumping from thought to thought, from worry to worry, from mental rehearsal to mental rehearsal, we create the mental space necessary for genuine focus to emerge. Silence thus becomes the fertile soil for deep concentration. In silence, our attention stops being a scattered flashlight, dimly illuminating a vast area of trivialities, and becomes a focused laser beam, capable of penetrating the complexity of a problem or the depth of an idea. Think of the great thinkers, scientists, artists, or strategists throughout history. Many of them attributed their moments of greatest insight to periods of stillness, contemplation, or uninterrupted focused work. It's no coincidence. Silence allows neural connections to form and strengthen, information to be processed and consolidated more effectively. It allows us to follow a line of thought to its logical conclusion, rather than being constantly sidetracked by new input. In an economy and society that increasingly value deep work and the ability to create genuine value, the ability to cultivate silence to achieve focus is a competitive advantage and a source of immense personal satisfaction. It's the difference between skating on the surface and diving into the depths of our cognitive potential. In addition to focus, silence radically sharpens our perception. When internal and external noise decreases, our senses become more acute. We begin to notice things that previously went unnoticed. Externally, we can become more aware of another person's subtle body language in a conversation, the tone of voice that reveals an unspoken emotion, the nuances of a situation that indicate a hidden dynamic. We become better listeners, not just of the words, but of the meaning behind them. The nature around us can reveal details, the specific song of a bird, the way light falls on a leaf, that were previously obscured by our mental preoccupation. This heightened perception of the outside world enriches our life experience and improves our ability to interact effectively with the environment and others. Internally, the sharpening of perception through silence is even more transformative. We begin to observe our own thought patterns with greater clarity. We recognize our own biases, prejudices, and assumptions that would otherwise operate unconsciously. We can notice the emergence of an emotion before it completely overwhelms us, allowing us to respond with the wisdom cultivated by the emotional fortitude we have already discussed. Silence allows us to hear the subtler voice of our intuition, that visceral feeling or quiet knowing that is often drowned out by the noise of overanalysis or doubt. The heightened perception that comes from silence is not just about seeing and hearing better. It is about understanding more deeply, understanding the world, others, and, crucially, ourselves. It's like cleaning a pair of glasses that you didn't even know were dirty. Suddenly, the contours of reality become sharper and more defined. Finally, and perhaps most crucially, silence is the quintessential tool for discerning what is essential. Amid the avalanche of options, tasks, information, and demands that characterize modern life, it's incredibly easy to lose sight of what really matters. We are pulled in 1,000 different directions, often responding to what is most urgent or loudest, rather than what is truly meaningful or aligned with our deepest values. Silence offers a refuge from this tyranny of urgency. By retreating into a space of stillness, we can ask the difficult but fundamental questions. What is truly important to me? What are my essential priorities in life, work, relationships? Where should I focus my limited energy and attention to have the greatest impact and live a more purposeful life? This discernment process is not necessarily easy. It requires honesty with ourselves and the courage to say no to many good things in order to be able to say yes to the few essential things. But it is in silence that we find clarity and strength to make these choices. Silence allows us to separate the wheat from the chaff, the signal from the noise, the vital from the trivial. This helps us recognize distractions for what they are and re-enter our core goals. Whether it's setting career goals, making important life decisions, or simply organizing our day-to-day lives, silence provides the mental space to evaluate options not based on external pressure or habit, but based on a clear understanding of what will bring us closer to the life we aspire to live. It is a powerful filter that helps us simplify, eliminate the superfluous, and focus on what nourishes our soul and contributes to our flourishing. Cultivating this clarity born of silence does not require prolonged monastic retreats, although they can help. It starts with intentionally introducing small islands of stillness into our daily routine. It can be as simple as taking 5 minutes in the morning to sit quietly before the day begins, taking a walk in nature without headphones, turning off notifications during periods of focused work, or simply taking a mindful pause and breathing deeply before moving on to the next task. It's about recognizing the value of silence not as a void to be filled, but as an active and fertile space where clarity, focus, and insight can flourish. In doing so, we are not running away from the world. We are equipping ourselves to navigate it with greater wisdom, effectiveness, and serenity. We are learning to see through the fog, to find our course, and to walk with purpose toward what is truly essential. Silence, therefore, is not only the builder of emotional fortitude, but also the beacon that lights the way. If silence is the beacon that lights the way to the essential, as we have seen, its application extends far beyond our inner landscape. In fact, one of the arenas where the power of silence manifests itself most surprisingly and effectively is in interpersonal communication. It might seem like a paradox. How can the absence of words strengthen communication, an intrinsically verbal activity? However, when we look closer, we discover that strategic silence is not a void, but a potent tool that confers authority, deepens connection, and helps us find the right word at the right time. Let's think first about authority. In a world saturated with noise, where many feel the compulsive need to fill every second of pause with words, the person who is comfortable with silence stands out. Nervous gossip, the rush to respond, the inability to tolerate a moment of stillness, all of these can signal insecurity, lack of reflection, or anxiety. In contrast, the intentional use of silence in a conversation can project confidence, thoughtfulness, and control. When a speaker pauses before answering a difficult question, he is not necessarily hesitating. You are giving yourself time to process, to formulate a considered response. This pause can increase the anticipation and weight of the words that follow. It signals that the speaker takes the question seriously and that his or her answer will not be superficial. Likewise, a leader who listens attentively, allowing silences while others speak, demonstrates respect and an authority that does not need to be asserted through volume or constant interruption. This active silence communicates that the person is present, absorbing the information and not just waiting for their turn to speak. Psychologically, silence can make others lean in, paying more attention. It conveys the subtle message that words, when chosen, have value and are not mere space fillers. Those who master silence in communication do not demonstrate fear of emptiness, but rather control over themselves and the interaction. They don't feel the desperate need for approval or to dominate the soundstage. His presence and his words, when spoken, gain a resonance and respect that incessant speech can rarely achieve. It is the calm authority that arises not from imposition, but from calculated restraint. Beyond authority, silence is an incredibly powerful catalyst for genuine human connection. True communication is not just transmitting information, it's about building bridges of understanding and empathy between people. And here, silence plays a fundamental role as the basis of active and deep listening. Often when we think about being good communicators, we focus on how to speak better. But what if the key to a deeper connection lies in how to silence better? Truly listening is not just recording the words the other person says. It's about creating a safe and welcoming space for her to fully express herself, including the emotions, hesitations, and unspoken meanings that reside between the words. Silence in this context is not passive, it is an act of generosity and presence. When we resist the urge to interrupt, to offer immediate solutions, to share our own related story, we are communicating to the other, I'm here for you, your thinking, your feeling, your experience are important. You have my time and undivided attention. This kind of silent listening allows us to pick up on nuances, the tone of voice that betrays the sadness behind bold words, the body language that reveals uncertainty, the pause that indicates deep reflection. It allows the other person to feel truly seen and heard, which is one of the most fundamental human longings. Think about the difference between sharing something vulnerable with someone who immediately jumps in with advice or starts talking over you, versus someone who simply listens silently, perhaps with an understanding nod, allowing your words and emotions to breathe. Finally, silence is crucial to finding and uttering the right word at the right time. In the dizzying speed of modern life and digital conversations, we are often pressured to respond instantly. This pressure often leads to reactive, impulsive, or poorly formulated responses that we may later regret. Silence offers the antidote, the space for reflection before expression. Just as inner silence helps us discern the essential, silence in communication allows us to calibrate our response, choose words carefully, and consider the impact they will have. How many times has a word spoken in anger or haste caused unnecessary damage to a relationship? How many opportunities were missed because we didn't stop to think about the best way to present an idea? Silence before speaking allows us to access the clarity and wisdom we cultivate internally. This allows us to move from reactive mode to responsive mode. Instead of firing off the first thing that comes to mind, we can ask ourselves, what is the intention behind my communication? What is the most effective and constructive way to express my point of view? What does the other person need to hear right now? This process does not require long periods of meditation in the middle of a conversation. Often all it takes is a few seconds of conscious pause. This brief stillness may be enough to filter raw emotion, organize thoughts, and find language that is both honest and diplomatic, clear and compassionate. In negotiations, for example, a well-placed pause can not only convey control, but also allow time to assess the situation and formulate a more strategic counterproposal. In a heated argument, a moment of silence can break the cycle of escalation and make room for a calmer resolution. In a supportive conversation, you can allow yourself to find words of comfort that are genuine and meaningful, rather than empty cliches. Silence, therefore, is not just the absence of sound. It is the birthplace of thoughtful, precise, and impactful words. It is the space where communication stops being mere noise and becomes an art. Mastering silence in communication does not mean becoming mute or passive. On the contrary, it means adding a sophisticated and versatile tool to our communication repertoire. It's about learning to use pauses with intention, listen deeply, and speak with greater consideration and impact. It's recognizing that sometimes what we don't say, and the space we create with our silence, can be as powerful or more powerful than the words we choose to speak. By cultivating this skill, we not only project greater authority and build stronger connections, but we also ensure that when we speak, our words have the weight, clarity, and resonance that come from reflective stillness. In a world that screams to be heard, perhaps the most powerful way to communicate is to learn the art and science of silence. We talk about how silence shapes our external communication, establishes authority, and deepens our connections with others. But perhaps its most transformative and radical application is the one we direct inwards, towards our own being. In a world saturated not only with sound noise but also with the incessant noise of opinions, other people's expectations, comparisons, and the frantic search for external validation, inner silence emerges as the key to a profound form of freedom, authentic freedom. This is the freedom to be ourselves, to act from our center, regardless of the approval or disapproval of the outside world. This is where silence helps us build self-reliance and untie the knots of dependence on validation. We live in a culture that often conditions us to seek our worth outside of ourselves. From childhood, we are taught to measure our success and happiness through external markers: grades, awards, promotions, number of followers, likes, positive comments. Our sense of self becomes dangerously entwined with others' perceptions of us. We have become like actors on a global stage, constantly adjusting our performance to please an invisible but omnipresent audience. This incessant search for validation is exhausting and deeply limiting. This makes us fragile, susceptible to the slightest criticism, and prevents us from following paths that may not be popular or immediately rewarded by social applause. We are trapped in a dance where our movements are dictated not by our inner music, but by the rhythm imposed from the outside. Our internal compass becomes uncalibrated, always pointing towards the magnetic north of other people's opinions. Silence, in this context, works as a powerful antidote. By cultivating moments of inner stillness, by turning off the volume of external noise, be it the social media feed, peer pressure, or even the internalized voices of criticism and expectation, we create a sacred space to find ourselves. In this silent space, free from the cacophony of external opinions, we begin to hear a different voice, more subtle but infinitely more important, our own inner voice. It is the voice of our intuition, our core values, our authentic desires, and our deepest truths. At first, this silence can be uncomfortable. We may be confronted with thoughts or feelings that we have avoided, with the uneasiness of not knowing who we are without the mirror of external validation. We may be tempted to quickly fill that void with more noise, more distraction. But if we persevere, if we have the courage to remain in that space of stillness, we begin to discover the richness that resides within us. We begin to discern what really matters to us, beyond passing trends or social expectations. We begin to recognize our own needs, our limits, our genuine passions. This process of silent self-listening is the basis of self-awareness, and it is from this self-awareness cultivated in silence that true self-sufficiency is born. As we begin to know and trust our own inner voice, the desperate need for external validation gradually diminishes. We no longer need others to tell us who we are, what we should feel, or what we should do. We begin to develop an internal anchor, a center of gravity that keeps us stable even in the face of storms of criticism or the absence of applause. Our self-esteem stops being a volatile commodity, dependent on fluctuations in the opinion market, and becomes a solid inner conviction, based on self-knowledge and self-acceptance. Imagine the difference. Making an important decision in your life, whether it's about your career, your relationships, or your lifestyle, based on a deep inner conviction, the result of silent reflection, versus making it primarily to please your parents, impress your friends, or follow what is considered normal or successful by society. The first approach leads to an aligned, authentic life, where actions reflect values. The second often leads to a feeling of emptiness, of maladjustment, even if externally everything seems perfect. Silence gives us the clarity and courage to choose the first path. This self-sufficiency does not mean arrogance or isolation. It doesn't mean we stop valuing the opinions and advice of others or that we become insensitive to feedback. On the contrary, when we are grounded in ourselves, we can listen to others more openly and less defensively, because our identity is not at stake. We can consider different perspectives without feeling threatened. We can receive constructive criticism without it shaking our sense of fundamental value. The crucial difference is that the final decision, the direction of our life, comes from within. External validation becomes a nice bonus, not a vital necessity. This is the essence of authentic freedom. It is not just freedom from something, free from external pressure, free from the need to please, but freedom from something, free to be who we really are, free to follow our own path, free to live according to our deepest values. It's the freedom to express ourselves honestly, even if our voice shakes. It's the freedom to make mistakes and learn from them, without being paralyzed by the fear of judgment. It is the freedom to find contentment and inner peace regardless of external circumstances. Cultivating this freedom through silence is a revolutionary act in a world that constantly pulls us outside of ourselves. It requires practice and intention. You can start with small steps. Dedicate a few minutes a day to sit in silence without distractions. Take walks in nature without listening to music or podcasts. Turn off cell phone notifications for defined periods. Practice attentive listening not only to others but also to your own thoughts and feelings without immediate judgment. It's about deliberately creating pockets of stillness in our everyday lives, allowing our inner voice to emerge and strengthen. In doing so, we discover that silence is not empty but full of self-knowledge, clarity, inner strength. We discover that the greatest validation we can receive comes not from outside, but from our own clear conscience, from the knowledge that we are living in alignment with our most authentic self. We free ourselves from the invisible chains of other people's approval and reclaim our personal sovereignty. This is perhaps one of the most profound gifts of silence, the ability to return to ourselves, to become the final authority in our own lives, and to experience the peace and strength that come from a truly self-sufficient and free existence. In a world that wants to shape us, silence gives us the space to discover and be our own shape. We have thus reached the threshold of a deeper understanding, not just of silence itself, but of its transformative power when consciously integrated into the tapestry of our everyday lives. Having explored how silence frees us from the tyranny of external validation and returns us to ourselves, the question that naturally emerges is, how can we weave this rediscovered stillness into our existence so that we cultivate not only inner peace, but also a renewed sense of purpose? How do we transform this practice, sometimes felt like a sporadic refuge, into a fundamental pillar on which we build a more meaningful and aligned life? This integration is the heart of what we might call Stoic silence. Not an empty or passive silence, but an active, intentional silence that informs our actions and shapes our character. Integrating Stoic silence does not mean withdrawing from the world or adopting a literal vow of silence. Rather, it means bringing the quality of inner stillness into the midst of the hustle and bustle of life. It's learning to carry with us a portable sanctuary of inner peace, a mental space where we can retreat, even if for brief moments, to recenter ourselves before responding to the demands of the world. It means cultivating the ability to pause before reacting, to truly listen, not just to others, but also to our own impulses and emotions, before speaking or acting. It is the practical application of the Stoic wisdom of distinguishing between what we can control, our thoughts, judgments, and responses, and what we cannot, external events, the actions of others. Silence becomes the laboratory where we practice this crucial distinction. Let's think about this in practical terms. When faced with a stressful situation at work, the immediate reaction, fueled by the internal noise of panic or anger, can be impulsive and harmful. Integrating Stoic silence here means acknowledging the inner turmoil, taking a conscious pause, perhaps just a deep silent breath, and accessing that space of inner stillness. From there, we can assess the situation more clearly, consider our options in light of our values, courage, justice, temperance, wisdom, and choose a thoughtful response rather than a visceral reaction. Silence, in this case, does not eliminate stress, but it creates the necessary distance so that we are not dominated by it, allowing for more virtuous and effective action. Likewise, in our relationships, how many arguments escalate due to hasty responses, to words spoken in the heat of the moment, driven by the noise of our own insecurities or hurts? Built-in Stoic silence offers an alternative. It allows us to listen to our partner, friend, or family member with a calmer presence, trying to understand their perspective without immediately formulating our defense. It also allows us to recognize our own emotional reactions without being hijacked by them. In this space of inner stillness, we can choose words that build bridges rather than walls, that express our feelings and needs assertively, but respectfully. Silence becomes the basis for more authentic and compassionate communication. But the integration of silence goes beyond managing difficult moments. It is fundamental to discovering and living our purpose. In a world saturated with messages about what we should want, what constitutes success, and which path to follow, it is incredibly easy to get lost and adopt purposes that are not truly ours. We live according to scripts written by others, by society, by family, by advertising. Silence, as we explored, is the great unmasker of these external influences. By regularly cultivating stillness, we create the space needed for our own inner voice, the voice of our Stoic daemon, to be heard. What does it truly mean to have a purpose? We often associate it with great achievements or a unique vocation. However, from a Stoic perspective and facilitated by silence, purpose can be understood more fundamentally: to live in harmony with our rational and social nature, to cultivate virtue in all our actions, and to contribute to the common good as best we can within our circumstances. Silence helps us clarify what our core values are, those character qualities we aspire to embody. It helps us identify the areas of our lives where we can apply these values more meaningfully. Perhaps our purpose is not to change the entire world, but rather to be a present and virtuous father, an ethical and diligent professional, a loyal and supportive friend, or an active citizen in our local community. Silence allows us to do the inner work necessary to align our daily actions with these deeper values and purposes. In the silence of reflection, We can examine our motivations, evaluate whether our choices are contributing to the type of person we want to be and the type of life we consider meaningful. We can ask, is this activity, this commitment, this way of spending my time in alignment with my core values? Are you moving me toward my purpose as I understand it now? Without these moments of silent pause and introspection, we run the risk of living on autopilot, pursuing external goals that ultimately leave us feeling empty. Integrating Stoic silence is therefore an ongoing commitment. It is not something that can be achieved once and for all, but rather a practice that deepens with time and intention. It starts with a conscious decision to value stillness and deliberately create space for it, whether through formal meditation, moments of reflection throughout the day, time spent in nature, or simply turning off digital distractions for set periods of time. As we practice, our ability to access this inner space of calm and clarity strengthens, like a muscle that is exercised regularly. It becomes less of an effort and more of a natural way of being in the world. This integration transforms our relationship with life itself. Instead of constantly being swept along by the current of external events and emotional reactions, we develop an inner anchor. This anchor does not stop us from sailing through the waters of life, with its inevitable storms and calms, but it gives us stability and direction. It allows us to face adversity with greater resilience because our inner peace does not depend exclusively on external circumstances. It allows us to appreciate joy and beauty more deeply because we are more present and less distracted. It allows us to act in the world from a place of inner conviction and integrity rather than fear or the need for approval. Living with purpose, from this perspective informed by Stoic silence, is not about endlessly chasing an idealized future, but about finding meaning in the way we live in the present. It's about the quality of our intentions and actions, moment to moment. Purpose lies in practicing virtue, contributing to something greater than ourselves, whether it be our family, our community, or humanity, and calmly accepting what we cannot control. Silence is the fertile soil where this understanding flourishes and where we find clarity and strength to live in accordance with it. As we conclude this exploration, it becomes clear that silence, far from being a mere absence of sound, is a powerful presence. It is an invitation to introspection, a catalyst for self-awareness, a shield against the tyranny of external and internal noise, and a compass that guides us toward a more authentic and purposeful life. Integrating Stoic silence into our lives is an act of profound wisdom and courage. It is reclaiming our innate right to inner peace and mental clarity. It is choosing to live not like a leaf in the wind, at the mercy of other people's opinions and fluctuating circumstances, but like a well-rooted tree, capable of withstanding storms and flourishing according to its own nature. It is ultimately the path to transforming our existence from a mere succession of events into a meaningful journey, lived with intention, resilience, and a deep, calm inner strength. So we come to the end of this video. If you like the content, like it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. This helps us strengthen the Stoic community and help more people. Finally, embrace silence, not as an end in itself, but as the means to discover and live your truest and most virtuous expression in the world.